In April of 2017, the Nintendo Switch was far different than it is today. While the Nintendo Switch has well over 150 million sales now, back then Nintendo themselves weren't even sure if the platform was going to succeed. Though the system seemed to be selling well, Nintendo made sure to keep producing games for their dedicated handheld, the Nintendo 3DS, just in case things didn't work out so well. Back then, there were only a few games to play. Breath of the Wild, of course, was the launch title for the system, and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe did satisfy many who wanted a more casual multiplayer experience, but by the end of April, only having 2 major games to play could get a little bit old after a while. We were still months away from Nintendo's next major first-party game coming in June with the game ARMS. With how little there was to play on the Switch and how little there was on the eShop, seeing a new $5 indie game on the eShop with adorable graphics and a top-down perspective reminiscent of old 2D Zelda was sure to turn a lot of heads. Kamiko was released on Nintendo Switch on April 13th, 2017 in Japan and April 27th everywhere else. It's a wonderful little game that can be beaten in under half an hour if you know how to speed through it. We play as 3 heroine Mikos. A Miko is a young priestess that works at a Shinto shrine in Japan. Kamiko features lots of Shinto imagery. The main quest of the game involves us cleansing Shinto-like arches called tori from demons. We fight our way through the game solving puzzles and defeating enemies. The 3 characters we get to play give us a ton of variety in gameplay and make each run through the game feel unique. First we have Yamoto, a water Miko who fights using a sword. Her sword allows us to get in close and attack enemies with ease, but the lack of any ranged attack means that we'll be more vulnerable to danger. This is generally the easiest of the 3 characters to play, and I think most people would probably agree with that. Next we have Uzume, an Earth Miko who uses a bow and arrow. Her bow can shoot out in a fan pattern, but she lacks any kind of close quarters defense. Shooting leaves the player very vulnerable as they're not able to move very much, but being able to attack from range can make clearing a path a breeze. Finally, we have my personal favorite, Hinome. Hinome uses a small dagger and a shield. She throws the shield almost like a frisbee and uses it to deal large amounts of damage to enemies. Whilst the shield is thrown out, the player can also swing the dagger to take out enemies who are getting a bit too close. The trick with Hinome is knowing how to manipulate the shield into enemies while also taking out others with a dagger. I would argue that she takes the most skill to master, but that of course depends on how you like to play. At the start of any playthrough, our heroines are blessed with their very own Imperial Regalia, a symbol of authority in ancient Imperial Japan. These, of course, are their weapons. Demons have entered the world and seek to disconnect the heavens from the earth via corrupting these tori. By using SP points, the player can cleanse these altars. Each stage has 4 altars that need to be cleared with a total of 100 SP each. The best way to gain SP is by killing enemies in combos. By taking out multiple enemies without getting hit in quick succession, the player can quickly rack up SP. SP also allows the player to open doors, chests, and do a special attack. And maybe this is a good time to bring up the controls. The controls are extremely simple. I found using the analog stick was honestly a lot better than using the D-pad despite the game's top-down perspective. There are only 2 actions that the player can perform, being attack or sprinting. Both of these are extremely important. Several puzzles in the game revolve around players sprinting to certain spots before a timer runs out. Some puzzles take away the ability to attack or sprint, forcing the player to dodge enemies without taking damage. These stages seem to mirror our 3 heroines. Our first stage is a beautiful forest, befitting of our Earth Miko, Izume. The second stage is water-themed, and the third is fire-themed. The fourth and final stage has a sort of like heavenly kind of abandoned vibe to it. I think it would be fun to go through each stage and talk about the different aspects of them that makes this game so wonderful. Our first stage opens with the player locked in a room with a few enemies. This gives us a safe environment to learn our controls without running into too many bad guys. To proceed, we must step on a switch to open a door at the top of the room. This tells us about switches and how we'll be using them. It's a simple introduction to how players will interact with this world. The first stage also introduces us to puzzles that become more difficult and complicated as the game goes on. There's one involving us moving a key to a door without getting hit, one that involves pushing a block onto a switch while standing on the other switch to open a door. There's this one which makes us carry 2 orbs to an altar to open a door, which is essentially the same thing as the key, but you have to do it twice. Really innovative. Which character you choose will change how you approach progressing in each level. As you move and adjust to the new controls in combat, the first stage is mostly open and easy to navigate. It's very difficult to get lost here. There are a couple spots where you'll need to move under treetops to find secrets, but outside of that, it's a mostly open stage with plenty of room to move around and get used to the game. In terms of theme, I think it's an excellent introduction to this world. The art style of this game is adorable, and this forest does a good job of showing that off. Next up is the water level. This level gives us some pretty big questions about the lore of this world. The entire level takes place in an abandoned, flooded city. Buildings are rotting and water covers most of the streets. As a consequence of this, the stage is far more tight than the previous forest level. We cannot swim, so we have to navigate these pretty tight areas. This level is also pretty hard to get lost in. While you can do some altars out of order, there's a pretty clear direction the devs intended players to go in. This time we have an orb puzzle again, but this orb is orange and it lights up the entire stage, so that's kinda cool. We get some new enemy varieties here and there, and they seem to just be a bit stronger than before. This level also gives us our first speed puzzle where we need to sprint from one area to another before a timer runs out. By flipping this lever, a bridge appears that we must run across. Failure to do so means either having to go back and hit the lever again, or falling into the water. The tricky part here isn't so much getting across, but rather dodging the enemies that could bump into you to cause you to just be very barely behind and fall into the water at the last moment. To be honest though, the most interesting part of this level isn't really the design or the puzzles, it's the lore implications. I love the design of this place, and it really makes me wonder what happened to this place and to the people that lived here. The third level is lava and fire themed. While not as tight as the water level, we are introduced to more dangerous enemies and more complicated puzzles. I've never been a huge fan of fire or lava themes in games. I don't really find the aesthetic to be very fun. I find it to be a bit boring and plain. And I'll admit this is really no exception. I will say though, the challenge of this level makes up for that. This is where things get a little bit difficult for first timers. There is a new enemy that appears and disappears and shoots beams out in 4 directions. They kind of remind me of the little wizard guys from Link's Awakening, honestly. I found these to be particularly challenging at first, especially with Hinome. They disappear and reappear so quickly, meaning you gotta get in there and get really close really quickly. This level also features a couple of what I call challenge rooms. These rooms lock once it's entered and can only be unlocked once all the enemies inside are defeated. Hinome is probably the best character for this. Her shield could just take out huge swaths of enemies and makes these honestly somewhat of a non-challenge. Overall, the puzzles and the challenge of this level do make up for the rather boring and bland theme in my opinion. And this brings us to the final stage. This one is very interesting. It almost feels like we're in like an abandoned mall that is disconnected from reality in its own weird way. There are stairs that feel like you'd find in a mall and vending machines around and even an abandoned bus. Perhaps it's like another abandoned city, though not flooded this time. This level is a culmination in everything we've done thus far. We have the toughest enemies and the most difficult puzzles, and honestly this key one sucks. I failed it way too many times, and it's likely the reason I haven't been able to do a sub 30 run just yet. These enemies will run after the player if we get too close. This is very annoying in the areas of the level that feature tight corridors and bad enemy spawn placements. Overall, I'd say this level is my second favorite. It feels like a final level in a very fun way. It's definitely one of the prettier levels too, and that helps. I love the abandoned city aesthetic. My fellow Kirby and the Forgotten Land enjoyers will know what I mean. Love that game. Something I haven't mentioned up until this point are boss fights and upgrades. Through each level, we can find secret health and SP upgrades. We can also find another at the end of each stage, just before the boss fight. The boss fights are really fun. Each one has its own clever little mechanic and attacks. The first boss fight will hop around the room trying to squish the player. The second boss has a snake-like body and will move around the room trying to attack the player. The third one uses lasers and projectiles to make life a living hell. The final boss's first phase, it's kind of its own unique style that I really love. The second phase is a combination of all the previous bosses, and that's a lot of fun. I love when games do this sort of thing. To defeat each boss, we must destroy the red glowing orb that seems to be some kind of power source for them. The boss fights do suffer from the hit it 3 times until it's dead Nintendo boss fight trope, though I will forgive it for being such a small game, and it leans into the speedrunning aspect of the game, so I'll give it a pass. Once the final boss is defeated, this same god from the beginning comes back to congratulate us and lets us keep the weapon for a little bit longer, entrusting us with it. It is implied that our character goes on to explore many lands and do many things in the world, all while we see some B-roll of people living the lives in these levels that we conquered, now demon-free. And that's Kamiko. Well, almost. There is one thing that I forgot to mention. You might have noticed these little question marks here at the bottom of the main menu. I figured beating the game as all 3 characters would unlock this hidden feature, or maybe getting a sub 30 on all characters, but no. It turns out, in each level there is a secret item, and once you find all 4, and I'm not going to spoil it here, you unlock a sound test mode, allowing you to listen to all the game's music from the main menu. I like this feature. I've seen some people online call it lame, but I like it. It's just a fun little Easter eggs that they've put in there for us to find. It's really cute. I really enjoy this sort of thing. Kamiko amassed 110,000 sales by July of 2017. The game was a hit in the beginning of the Switch's life. By June of 2019, the game sold over 250,000 copies. While those numbers may not seem like much compared to the massive AAA game sales of the Switch, 250,000 copies for a little indie game is no joke. The game was developed in roughly 4 months with the goal of being replayable and short. The reason I say Kamiko might have saved the Nintendo Switch is that it helped create one of the Switch's most defining features, an indie game powerhouse. With the Switch being a bit weaker in terms of hardware than the other consoles out there at the time, smaller budget games from small studios were perfect on the platform. Undertale, Hollow Knight, Shovel Knight, so many other indie games were right at home on the Switch and honestly make up some of the most fond memories I have with the system. It is because of Kamiko that I looked into other indie games on the Switch. It's just an easy game to pick up and play every once in a while. On a short car ride, pull out Kamiko. Waiting around for an awkward amount of time that is pretty short but not too short to the point where you won't get bored, just pull out Kamiko. It's a fun little time waster and it's charming. Which is why you should try Transit Ruby, another game by the developers of Kamiko. It's clear that Kamiko's success allowed the devs to create something bigger, and Transit Ruby is just that. It's a full Metroidvania game, and you can pick it up on almost every platform for $15. Steam even features a demo if you're not sure about buying it. Kamiko walked so this game could run. That same charming art style remains, and I was even shocked to see that combos are still here. You should also be on the lookout for Fairrune, an upcoming game by SKIPMORE Studios that seems to be very similar to Kamiko in its top-down perspective, but just on a larger scale, maybe perhaps a full RPG game. That'll be really cool. Seriously though, if you loved Kamiko and you wanted to play more of it, Transit Ruby is that more. It's a bit different, being that it's a side-scroller instead of a top-down game, but it's very much a continuation of Kamiko's vision. While Kamiko was a Switch exclusive for some time, it was released on all other platforms in 2019. So if you want to give it a go on your Xbox or on Steam, you're free to do so. But if you want that classic Kamiko experience on the platform it was made for, get it on Switch. It's a lovely little game. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.